Thanks, Blair. Okay, so you know, when it's been more than a decade that you left grad school, and when you were privileged enough to have become senior faculty elsewhere beyond grad school, one of the things you pray and hope that colleagues won't do to you is make you take your comprehensive exams all over again. Keynote speaker for today, Professor Réda Bensmaia. Did I get that right?
I don't know.
Bensmaia, I see it tréma.
I don't know the origin of this name anyway.
Okay.
But it's Bensmaia, Bensmaia, Bensmaia.
Bensmaia. I prefer Bensmaia. So apparently he didn't have such considerations for me, you know, because I had asked him, you know, in order to help me prepare this bio, you know, I simply would have gone online, you know, Googled him, you know, in order to put something together. But I asked him, you know, for a bio and a CV. I probably should have stopped at a bio, you know. But then I got this CV. I'm not going to tell you the number of pages, you know, in that hefty document, but my gut instinct, my first instinct when I looked at it is I'm not going to print this and run out of ink. And this man certainly wants me to take my comprehensive exams all over again just on his CV. You know, I have to sit down, study this thing, and apply myself to it. It just goes to the, you know, the extraordinary scope and breadth of the scholarship, the achievements, and the work, the wonderful work that this colleague has done. So I'm just going to, in order not to give a paper on his CV, I'm just going to run through some of the highlights, you know, and then conclude with one particular way in which I have found one of his books, you know, way back when I was also in the US, you know, very, very important, you know, for my own work and conceptualization of my field. Réda Bensmaia is currently University Professor of French and Francophone Literature in French Studies Department and in the Department of Comparative Literature at Brown University. He has published numerous articles on French and Francophone literature of the 20th century, as well as on film theory and contemporary philosophy. He is the author of The Barthes Effect, Introduction to the Reflective Text, The Years of Passages, Alger ou la maladie de la mémoire, and Experimental Nations or the Invention of the Maghreb. And those are just, you know, the standalone books. He's also edited, co-edited, you know, several books, several significant special issues, you know, of journals. You know, and there's also, when I was looking through the document, he said there's also a long list, you know, of works, you know, which either have been accepted or have been solicited, or it's just a restless run of intellectual production. With somebody like this, you at this stage, you don't want to introduce a keynoter by going back to his own graduate studies, you know, or what he did over 30, 35 years ago in Paris. But looking through that CV, I felt that, okay, I saw some things, you know, the kind of environment in which, you know, his scholarship evolved in Paris, you know, the people he worked with, and I said I would be remiss if I didn't mention certain names, you know, somewhere between his diplôme d'études approfondies and his doctorat, you know, the kinds of names, you know, and scholars and thinkers and philosophers that he worked with, you know. So he worked with Gérard Genette, Jean-François Lyotard, and Roland Barthes. You know, so I saw those kinds of names, and I said, okay, he would forgive me if I mentioned, you know, his graduate work, you know, in the context of an extraordinary career that has spanned more than 3 decades. Of course, Professor Bensmaia Réda, you know, has been recipient over the years of numerous honors and awards. You know, his book, Experimental Nations, the one I will be talking about, was recipient of the Scaglione. Did I get that right? It sounds Italian. The Scaglione Prize of French and Francophone literary studies. You know, when Experimental Nations, or the invention of the Maghreb, was published, you know, one thing it did for me is that it filled a very critical vacuum, you know, in my own approach to post-colonial studies at that time, when it was still quite fashionable to focus on all those inventions of, you know, colonial societies and the creation of societies by all those imperialistic processes of history. And then the 2 texts that were critical to that field of studies were, of course, Yves Valentin Mudimbe's The Invention of Africa, which, and we all know, if you're familiar with his work, we all know that the Africa in that title is, of course, mostly sub-Saharan Africa. You know, it has that problem of excising a very significant part of the continent from the very idea, you know, of the invention of that continent. And of course, there's Edward Said's Orientalism, which, even if it, you know, deals with, you know, North Africa and all that, doesn't really deal with it in the sense of its locatedness, its rootedness within, you know, that geographical space. So the 2 books, you know, that I sort of was using for much of my work on the idea of nations as inventions, you know, weren't really dealing with the specificities of the Maghreb for me. And I think, so somewhere between the lacuna, you know, that I sensed in those 2 works, I found, you know, the ideas that Professor Bensmaia put together in that book are very useful, you know, in terms of helping me bring to, you know, critically focus, you know, on the Maghreb within the overall context of the ideas of invented nations, unfinished nations, you know, and nationalities. So, ladies and gentlemen, please help join me in welcoming, you know, distinguished keynote speaker, Professor Réda Bensmaia.
So I'm going to try to avoid the rhetorical formula that said that I didn't recognize myself in this presentation. It's too big. But I have to say that, you know, you just have to get a little bit older. And you'll see that your CV is going to be thicker and thicker, and be publishing, and someone would present you, and you would be amazed to hear that you have been able to do whatever people are saying about you. So, but let's go to what I'm supposed to introduce today. I want to preface what I want to say by saying 3 things. One is, I want you to keep in mind that this is experimental. It's a kind of test. It started from two events. One is that I was in Algiers when Mirza Anwash was producing the film Harragas. And so I realized that something that I would see on TV every day, horrible images, you know, Melilla, people, you know, climbing the fences, or of course all the people we hear that 100 people died here and another 20 there. So obviously there are two possibilities. You see it as something that is on TV, you know, and you go to Baudrillard and the implosion of images. It doesn't exist. It's like when Baudrillard would say, La guerre du Golfe n'a pas eu lieu. Didn't happen. So people say, oh, it's stupid or what? Of course it happened, and Baudrillard knew that it happened. But it doesn't, it's not an event. Ce n'est pas un événement. Ce n'est pas un événement because it doesn't affect us. We don't change. I mean, in our everyday life. So that was the first event. Mirza Anwash shooting a film. It's a fiction film, so-called. The second thing was just after what happened in Tunisia. Ben Ali left. Everybody was happy about it. And it came from Tunisia. And nobody would have thought that it's the Tunisian that would start the whole thing. Wow, bravo les Tunisiens. But a few days later, I was in Italy. It happens that I have to go to Italy because I have family over there. And on TV, what you see, Lampedusa, with Tunisians coming to Lampedusa. So Ben Ali lives, on the one hand, one door, and the other door you have Tunisians leaving Tunisia at the moment where you think they're going to stay home, they're going to fight. So this is the setting of my paper. I mean, I started thinking about it, and I said, well, qu'est-ce qui se passe? What's wrong with this? So Harragas, let me see. I guess everybody knew the word, right? No? Alors c'est formidable. Okay. So then I have a definition. You said that we have to go back to graduate school? No, undergraduate school. So this is the Harragas. This is what you find on Wikipedia. Oops.
Just hit cancel.
Cancel this thing?
And then start the slide. There you go.
So Harragas, it says from Arabic, Harrag, those who burn their immigration papers are North Africans, migrants who attempt to illegally immigrate to Europe or to European controlled islands in makeshift boats. The name comes from their practice of burning their identity papers if they are about to be captured. Harragas immigrate from North African countries, especially Algeria, but also Mauritania, Senegal, Tunisia. In fact, this definition is not right because there are other countries where the Harragas leaving the country and trying to go to Europe, as I will show in a short span of time. So I've chosen to speak about the Harragas, the practice undertaken by these, I would say, road burners, because it seemed to me that it offers one way to get at the heart of one of the themes of this conference, and particularly questions that end the presentation of the themes of the conference that Pius and Blair has proposed. That is, among other things, problems related to culture, identities, and the politics of change. And I would add to your, I mean, there are a long list, I would add migration. I think it's a very extremely important aspect of whatever, when we talk about Africa, people think migration. It's like when you talk about, let's say, minorities in Europe, people think Arabs, Islam, and in France, Algerians. As if, I mean, they had just Algerians in France, which doesn't make sense. There are 4 million Muslims, And they are thinking as if they had 20 million Muslims in France. This is, I mean, scandalous, and it could be deconstructed from a theoretical point of view. So I've also chosen to take this phenomenon as a springboard because it allows us to attack head-on a number of other questions suggested in the same context, in particular, to think about culture beyond national and disciplinary boundaries by engaging in a reflection that displaces Eurocentric paradigms of knowledge. And this is, I want just a little thing. Generally, the problem is the confusion between, I say, well, but you're using theoretical concept coming from Europe. Of course, but I don't see any problem here in trying to use a certain number of way of conceiving a certain number of things with the means that comes from all over the world. So I must begin by noting that I was interested and also concerned about the Harga phenomenon because it represents one of the most tragic and disturbing phenomena we have witnessed during the last 10 or 15 years. It is tragic because first, during the period from 1983 through February 2011, more than 13,000 migrants died at the borders of Europe. In the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean, more than 9,700 would-be migrants lost their lives, while in the Strait of Sicily, more than 3,000 persons died in transit between Libya, Egypt, Tunisia, Malta, and Italy, while several hundred lost their lives along the new routes between Algeria and Sardinia. It is disturbing because, second, it is a phenomenon that the so-called Arab Spring didn't stop. In fact, contrary to what one would have expected, the phenomenon, and I'm sorry about the notion, phenomenon is awful to call this a phenomenon, but we'll give it a name in due time. So the phenomenon tended to increase after the revolutions. What numerous observers have noted, for example, after what happened in Tunisia particularly, is the determination of those embarking on the Harga to reach another shore of the Mediterranean or the Atlantic, whatever the risk to life and limb. As bluntly stated by Idrissa Guiro in his documentary film on the Harraga, beautiful film entitled Barça ou Barzak, Barcelona or death, and Barzak means death. So in this film, what is extraordinary is that the young people who wished to make the crossing were ready to die rather than to give up their dream of reaching a European country. And I would like to show you a clip among now hundreds. There are a lot of documentaries, and they will tell you more about what is being produced. I have to, oh, this is it. This is a film by a Moroccan filmmaker. Let's hope that it's going to work. How come that it's not working?
Just once, maybe? The sound's not plugged in, so.
Again?
Oh, sorry. there's the French, but I think we. If we can, the connection